Hi, I'm Tim Phillips at Phillips and Company Advisors. Everything we do is built around one idea, helping you build not just wealth, but confidence, clarity, and long-term financial strength. Because the truth is, success with money isn't about spreadsheets alone. It's about behavior, patience, and perspective. That's why I'm excited to introduce our friend Morgan Housel, best-selling author of Psychology of Money. Morgan is one of the most thoughtful voices in finance. He brings stories, history, and human behavior together in a way that makes complicated ideas simple and powerful. Morgan, thanks for being here and take it away.
Hey everybody, Morgan Housel back here again, doing this video just for my friends at Phillips and Company. And I want to talk about one of the most important topics today that I hear about from people all the time when I speak about money, because it's one of the most important but challenging factors and issues that they deal with their money, which is the relationship between your money and your kids, and how you can pass along a legacy, both not just of money, but in values, of financial values, without breaking down the relationships that exist and are so important in your family. So this is a talk about values and hard work and support and the opposite of spoiled. Let me start with a little story that I've always loved, a little parable. John D. Rockefeller, who was at the time the richest man in the world, once walked into the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. He needed a room while his house was being remodeled at the time. And he asked the hotel agent for the cheapest room they had. The agent said, "Mr. Rockefeller, surely we can give you something better. When your own son stays at this hotel, he stays in the presidential suite." And John D. Rockefeller responded, "Yes, but my son has something that I never had, which is a rich father." Managing money and your kids is such a difficult thing. And like so much with money, it's not a financial problem that can be solved on a spreadsheet. This is all psychology and sociology and emotions. And money and kids might actually be the most emotional of all financial problems. I have not ever met a parent who is totally unemotional about their children's financial future. It's a very important topic. And one of the biggest aspects of this, kids and money, is how a parent can use their money to support their children and help their children without spoiling those kids. And a lot of very famous rich people have their own takes on this topic. Warren Buffett once said that he often hears rich people talk about how dangerous a welfare society is. He says it creates a generation of moochers who are relying on food stamps and unemployment benefits. But he once said, and I thought this was a very wise observation, he said, these same people are leaving their kids a lifetime supply of food stamps and beyond, he said. Instead of having a welfare officer, he said, they have a trust fund officer. And instead of having food stamps, they have stocks and bonds that pay dividends. Now, everybody has different views on this topic. This is not black and white, just to show you how difficult it can be. And of course, there are exceptions to that. But most of the exceptions, as in rich kids who inherit a lot of money without it impacting their ambition, are because those kids are special, not because the parents necessarily made a smart decision. If 18-year-old Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg was offered $1 billion when they're 18 years old, it wouldn't have slowed their ambition whatsoever. But those are the rare birds. Most people need to be driven by a fear of not making it in order to fuel their ambition. My good friend Chris Davis grew up in a very wealthy household. His grandfather is legendary investor Shelby Davis, who turned about $50,000 into almost $1 billion through investing. He was told when he was young that he would not see a penny of that money because his family didn't want to rob him of the opportunity of making it on his own. Chris now joked just a few years ago, he said, "They could have robbed me just a little bit." So look, this is never easy here. I want to talk a little bit about the nuance and what I've learned on this topic. One nuance here is that it is dangerous for you as a parent to live one lifestyle while you demand your kids live a different and more modest lifestyle. It's a very difficult thing to do. As a parent, you may have very good intentions for wanting to make your kids live a comparatively humble existence, to teach them virtue, hard work, and respect. It's very well-intentioned, but you risk teaching them something different, completely different, which is resentment. Let me take an extreme example here. If you fly first class while making your kids fly in coach, the message that you might intend to send them is, Work as hard as you can. Work as hard as I have, and maybe one day you will get this nice seat that I have. But the message that the kids so often hear when they experience something like this is, the message they hear from the parent is, I am more worthy than you, and I enjoy watching you squirm. That's often, it's not the intention, but it's often the message that gets passed down. The parent wants to teach their kids hard work and dignity, but what actually is taught is humiliation and resentment. Unintentional, very often what happens. A good friend of mine tells a story that when he went on family ski trips as a kid, his grandfather would say, if you want me to buy you a lift ticket, you first need to hike up the mountain and then ski down on your own, and then I'll buy you a lift ticket. And the lessons that the kids learned from that experience was not hard work and virtue. The lesson that they learned was grandpa can kind of be a jerk sometimes. And you can do as much damage trying to instill dignity in your children as you can by spoiling them rotten. Let me say that again, because that might be the most important part of this. You can do just as much damage to your kids by trying to instill dignity in them you can by spoiling them rotten. Every family, of course, eventually finds their own way, but everything that I have seen on this topic tells me that when kids are young and living with their parents, the parents and the kids have to live the same material lifestyle. And so you, the parent, need to pick that lifestyle very carefully. The idea of saying, you haven't earned what I have, can be a less effective message than, let me teach you the value of hard work by doing it together, by living this life together. And so to summarize that point, lead by example, not by humiliation. Every family is different, and this is a touchy subject, but everything I've seen leads to that conclusion. Now, once your kids are grown and stable and on their own, my philosophies of handling money and kids tend to adapt over time. When my kids are older, I want them to use my money to at least be a last resort safety net on their ability to fall too far in life, but I never want it to be a fuel. That's my philosophy. I want to use my money as a safety net, but not as a fuel. So much of success in life is learning how to fail without falling so hard that you can never recover. And so my philosophy is I want to prevent that. I want to prevent collapse, but I never want to use money as a crutch for my kids to avoid learning on their own the value of hard work and dignity and managing failure. When my first son was born, I wrote a letter to him, and I wanted to talk about some of the financial values that I found important. Maybe he will read this letter at some point. It was also just me trying to be introspective as a new parent on what I wanted to do for my kids. And here's a little bit that I wrote. I wrote, quote, "This might sound harsh, but I hope you're poor at some point. Not struggling and not unhappy, of course, but there is no way to learn the value of money without feeling the power of its scarcity. Your parents will work hard to support you and open the doors of opportunity, but we're not going to spoil you. We're not trying to be mean, but learning that you can't have everything you want is the only way to understand the difference between a need and a desire. It will teach you how to budget, how to save, how to value what you already have. Learning to be frugal without it hurting is an essential life skill that will come in handy during life's inevitable ups and downs." I still believe that 10 years later. I think I wouldn't change a word of that. Author Rob Henderson makes a very related point that has always stuck with me. He said, "A noble goal as a parent should not be to raise successful children. Success should be an offshoot of raising children who feel confident enough to find success on their own." He wrote, quote, "I've come to believe that upward social mobility shouldn't be our priority as a society. Rather, upward mobility should be the side effect of something far more important, which is family and stability and emotional security for children." I tell my kids that true success is when people who you want to love you do love you. It's when people who you want to love you do love you. And that love comes overwhelmingly, I think, from how you treat people rather than what you spend or some level of net worth that you have. The most important financial advice I can give to my kids is that money alone won't provide the thing that they and almost everybody else wants most in life. Because no amount of money can compensate for a lack of character or honesty or genuine empathy towards other people. And so when I think of it like that, it's so obvious what I want to teach them, which is the character, the psychology, and the attitude needed to be confident workers and trusted friends and good citizens and good parents someday, which will in turn help them thrive financially. Now, let me talk about a few other things on this topic that I think are very important, the topic of money and kids. Number one, it is very good to have people in your life who you don't want to disappoint. It's a very good thing in life. A good motivator in life is to have people who you don't want to disappoint. And there may be no better example of that than having kids. And so it's very common for parents to ask how their money will influence their children. But the reverse is often just as meaningful. How do your children influence your financial decisions? Financial advisor Carl Richards says the point of a good financial advisor is to put a gap between you and stupid, to guard against your worst impulses. Having kids in your life who you don't want to disappoint can do that in such a powerful way. And so that leads me to the next point. Your kids are paying attention. Always, whether you realize it or not, they are paying attention to what you do financially and many other topics. If the parents are spoiled and materialistic, the kids will be too. If the parents are hardworking with good values, watch what happens to the kids. That is so often the case. There are several studies showing that kids inherit most of their political beliefs from their parents, particularly their father. One Pew study showed that 8 in 10 parents who lean Republicans had teens who identified as Republican. And for Democrats, it was 9 in 10. So just a very strong correlation between your political beliefs and what your kids eventually believe. And what I think is remarkable about those numbers is that most parents don't sit their kids down to intentionally explain why one political party is better than the other. There's almost never a detailed, explicit lecture of pros and cons and counters and rebuttals. Most parents don't do that. But their kids still inherit those views because they're always paying attention. They notice all the offhand comments and the winces while watching the news and how the parents respond to this selection or that neighbor's opinion. Over time, through the accumulation of thousands of subtle clues, few of which the parent actually meant to be explicit, the child builds up what becomes firm political beliefs. And I bring that up because I think money is so similar. You don't have to sit your kids down at the dinner table and explain to them your money values. They already know. Since the child was a small kid, they have cataloged every time that you said, "We can't afford that," or "I love that we bought this." They see what you value and what you don't value. They watch what you waste. They made a mental note of how happy you were when you came home and announced that you got a raise, or how scared you looked when you came home and announced that you got laid off. They noticed when you were envious of your neighbor's new car, house, or boat. They heard you and your spouse bickering over spending decisions. They noticed when you were greedy. They noticed when you were frugal. They paid attention to every single bit of it. And by the time that they became young adults, it will have accumulated into a profound effect of how they think about money. And so the next point, leading right into that, is what do you want them to pay attention to? If your kids are always paying attention, what do you want them to pay attention to? And when you realize that kids are always paying attention, you realize that every moment is an opportunity to lead by example. I'll show you how I think about this. I want to show my kids how you can use money as a tool to live a better life. I do not want to burden or poison them with displays of insecurity and greed. I want to show by example that if you've covered what matters in terms of family, health, and friends, you feel less desire to use your money to show off for strangers. I want to show them by example that no amount of money that you have and no material item that you possess will cause people to like you if you're a jerk, lack empathy, or feel superior to those who haven't been as fortunate as you are. And I want to show them by example that the highest use of money is to use it to control your time and give you the freedom and the independence to live the life that you want to live and that you chose. Remember what they will remember you by. Jonas Salk, who invented the polio vaccine, was once asked what his main aim was in life. And I loved his reply. He said, "I want to be a good ancestor." What a wonderful goal for every parent, to leave your kids and your grandkids and all the other future generations the knowledge of how the world works. the wisdom to know what matters, and the independence to make their own choices, the confidence to take risks, the prudence to be a long-term thinker, and the values to know how they themselves can become good ancestors. And how much of being a good ancestor has to do with money. Buying your kids nice things or leaving them an inheritance is important. I want to do it like everyone else, but I think it's so little. It's easy for parents to think that spending money on their kids will lead them to have a better life, and it can. But that thinking is often a crutch. It's often just an excuse to avoid teaching some of the life lessons that are more meaningful and enduring, or to be there for them, or to show their love for them in different ways. Kids may want your money and can use your money to live a better life, but what they'll come to value and remember you by are the deeper values that money can't buy.